So we stay with these ideas. We stay with these ideas. So let's say Plato. What you have to remember is that Plato wanted to give all the power to the philosopher king and make them kings, because they should live isolated from society, so not to be corrupted, and they could act with virtue in the public interest. Now, this was in the ancient Greece. This was 2,300 years ago, but as you see, we still facing the same problem. We should govern the society. Every time you say you should put to govern society people who actually knows the economy, and not these ignorant people who got elected. That we have this issue still nowadays, that the political elites are often ignorant. Like in China right now, they put a rule that even influencers have to have a degree. Whilst we see that in Western society, we are a democratic society, so we have these political rights. Having political rights, what does it mean? That every citizen can candidate for the elections. So every citizen can candidate for the election. So, and also every citizen can vote. Doesn't matter if you have no idea, if you're illiterate, not able to read them, you can vote. If you have no knowledge of political affairs, you can candidate. So we have a situation in which, since we have the universal suffrage and every citizen can vote, and the majority of the citizens did not go to university. The majority of they want, representative who is like them. So you often have ignorant politicians, like, for example, look at the Italian government right now. They're not very much, they're not exactly the most educated people in university, right? So in some times of crisis, you put in Western society, you put what we call technical governments. Like, for example, we had a couple of big crises, of financial crisis of 2008. That 2008, the world was struck by a very hard financial crisis. It struck hard Italy. Okay, at the time we had Berlusconi, who was considered not that able to manage that complicated crisis. So they put as prime minister. They called the director of the most important economic university in Italy, which is the Bocconi in Milan, Mario Monti, and they said, could you please come and rule the country because you have a better knowledge of how to manage this economic crisis, and he put all, economists and so on in the government. So you still have this situation in which we're debating if we should be ruled by philosopher kings, which this is in the Plato language, philosopher king, but should we be ruled by those who have the knowledge, by those who better understand the situation and how to treat with it? And this we have, we often have, like, for example, we have the president of the European Central Bank. This is probably the most important institution we have in Europe. The Central Bank makes the most important decision for the European population, But it is not get elected, because we consider that the president of the Central Bank should be, a good economist, and should not be just elected because people like this guy. So Plato was saying, we have this problem. He didn't like democracy so much. He said, here in Athens we have democracy, but we see that all these people that gather together in the Boule, they cannot distinguish between freedom and license. They want to expand freedom so much, so they neglecting civic duties. So he was looking at the degeneration of the democracy, in which everybody had a say. But this makes, the fact that if the majority is ignorant, then with the democracy you go not in the public interest, but in in some way in the immediate interest. And they say, no, we should put all the power in the hands of this philosopher king who got all their life studying public affairs, and then they got power, but that man should remain isolated from society in order not to get corrupted. So, like for example, he also supported that even qualified women, so this was a good stance for his time, qualified women also should be allowed to hold political power, So, he wanted to abolish private property in the public interest and give all the power to philosophers. So he was saying democracy doesn't work. I mean, he lived in a direct democracy, and he was saying that in this direct democracy often you had people who were acting, in the immediate interest, but not in the general interest, because they could not understand the general interest, we have this kind of problems. Like for example, nowadays, let's look at Europe. Europe, we have a big problem with pensions, retirement. Why? Because after World War II, we had a baby boom, a lot of young people were here. Right now, European society, Italy, France, they're getting old, aged population. So that who pays the pensions for the aged, for the elderly? The young people who are working. When you work, you give a part of your salary to the Institute for Pensions. This part of your salary, so the pensions of the elderly are paid by those who work. But then if the elderly population becomes far bigger than the population, the young population, means if they retired, if the elderly who retired from work and who need pensions to survive, becomes a bigger number than the young population who is working and actually pays this pension, it's a problem. Because in the future you're not going to have pensions anymore. So in a democracy, if you give power, if you give the word to the people, everybody will say, yeah, we have to keep the pensions right now because it's unfair to make elderly people living as poor. But at the same time, you must also have somebody who say, yeah, but what's going to happen in 10 years, in 15 years? So his point when he said in democracy, people are only looking at the immediate problem, and doesn't have the ability to look forward. So we have to, about Plato, we have to remember just these two things. First, he wanted to make all the power in the hands of those who have the knowledge. And we still have this nowadays, debates in politics, if we should expand more democracy and give more power to the people, or if we could, also put some mechanisms in which you try to put the most you put to the government the ones who are most skilled, prepared for the government. So this is a problem with democracy. The more you expand democracy, the more you risk that politicians in charge are not prepared. Because it's the opposite of science. We always say science is not democratic. Science is not democratic. It's not that if the majority says, yeah, the earth is flat, then the earth is flat. The earth is whether it's flat or rounded is based on people who actually do research, go to the moon, observe, write papers, peer reviews, and so on. So it's not about democracy. It's not that if the majority of the population tomorrow decide, yeah, we vote that the earth is flat, the earth is flat. No, because science has another procedure. Politics is based on democracy, but then sometimes democracy can bring to the government a guy who says, yeah, the earth is flat. So Plato was addressing this problem, and we say, no, we have to put the philosopher, the scientists, those who have the knowledge in charge. First thing. Second, we have to remember. So Plato supports the philosopher kings. the ruling of an elite, which was called the aristocracy. Aristocracy means the government of the best ones. Aristos, the best. So why also? There is a philosophical explanation for this. He supported the government of the philosopher kings because he was an idealist. An idealist. This means that he was trying to describe the ideal city. Politics as it ought to be, as this should be. You know? So it was bringing up a kind of utopian society, you know? The utopia is something that, the utopia is something that does not exist, but it only exists in our ideas because we want, it does not exist but is perfect. You know, utopia. Utopia in Greece means without a place that do not exist but is perfect. So it's an idea. It's an idea. So Plato described this utopian society in which philosopher king would rule. So his political philosophy revolved around the idea of a just society, which he believed could be achieved through a society ruled by philosopher king who possessed knowledge of the forms and then to achieve the ultimate form of the good. So he wrote this book, The Republic, you know, who was designing the perfect city, the perfect society, is an idealist. So we introduce this juxtaposition, idealism and realism. Idealism and realism. This, you know, is very important for the history of political thought. It's very important for political theory, but in general, is important for all the studies you will make in political science and international relations. You know, because nowadays we know that, for example, at least political relations are governed only by realist criteria, not idealist. So, this is very important. All the thinkers we're going to explore in this course can be, you know, classified as either as idealists or realists. So idealism is a normative political thought. So it's say how society should be. Realism is more critical. It is critical because it addresses reality and it criticizes reality. Doesn't want to design a utopia, perfect world. It look at reality. We go to his student, the founding father of realism, the founding father of political science, who is Aristotle. So Aristotle, he was a student of Plato. He was born in 348 before Christ. He was a student of Plato, and you know, there are continuities, but there are also differences with Plato. As we say, he is the founding father of realism, because he was agreeing on many things with Plato, but he disagreed on one thing, on the theory of forms. He said, Plato, this idea you had to look at the forms. No. I think that we produce better knowledge if you look at reality as it is, not at the forms, not at the ideas. Ideas might exist, might not exist, but we understand better if we look at reality, at the observation of living things, of actual things. So they established the difference between idealism and realism. Plato, as we saw before, he said truth can be found by looking inwards and into the world of ideas. Understanding comes for theory, speculation, reasoning. All knowledge exists independently of nature. So this means, first, as I said before, first there is the abstract ideas of a speaker, like this, which exist in my mind, which I have in my mind, thanks to this idea, which already exists, I'm able to recognize that this is a speaker. So we have to look at the ideas. So this is speculation. This is so an idealist approach, which is also a theoretical approach. Theoretical approach, which is different from an empirical approach. So Aristotle proposed an empirical approach. Plato proposed a theoretical approach. Plato was idealist and Aristotle was realist, because Aristotle said you have to look at reality. So this makes, thing also when you study political and social sciences, as you're doing, you have some disciplines, some exams who are theoretical, and some disciplines, some exams who are empirical. Okay? So, like for example, history of political thought is about thought, so it's about theories. We mostly address theories, we address books, we address authors, philosophers, thinkers, so we study the theories. It's most theoretical. If you go to sociology, sociology is the disciplines who want to study society. And to study society, they want to go in society and make empirical research. What does it mean? They collect data, they collect numbers, they analyze numbers, or maybe they do interviews, empirical interviews with the phenomenon they want to study. So they look at the phenomenon and they want to understand the true empirical research, which means collecting data, analyzing data. This data can be quantitative numbers or can be qualitative interviews. Political science also. They want to look how an institution works, so they do quantitative data about politics. Political theory, political philosophy is abstract. We have ideas. So you have these two things. Historical disciplines, usually they want to go to archive, so look at reality as it is in the archive, so it's more empirical. You have a question? No. So, Plato, founding father of idealism, theoretical scholar, power to the philosophers. Aristotle, to know the truth, you must focus on the nature and reality. Okay? Understanding is attained by examining nature, reality. Nature, reality, and knowledge are inseparable. So, the realist method. So, in order to get to know the ideas, you must start with concrete example of ideas are embodied. Okay? So, he was the son of a physician, of a medical doctor. So, he really liked, he wanted to observe facts. Medicine is medicine is the most empirical science that you can have. How do you get, the conclusion of medicine? They say, yeah, we observe 50 people who have this disease. We see if we give him this pill, if it passes or not. Then, if they get healed by this pill, good. If they don't get healed, it's not working. So, medicine is a pure empirical thing, because they test reality, and if reality goes in this direction, for medicine, it's the truth. So he was the son of a physician, and he believed in observable facts and the nature, the observation of the nature. So, he translated this empirical thing. So, you have to imagine, let's say, medicine as the paradigm of empirical studies. So, you go and you observe patients. You observe a number of patients, and you say, yeah, they reacted in this way to this medicine. So, this medicine works, this medicine doesn't work. He translated this empirical method to politics. So you say, dear Plato, you're my teacher, but you made this theory of the philosopher king. Yeah, myself and my students, We want to go to observe all the 158 city-state bodies that we have in Greece. We analyze each one, which form of government they have, and then from this empirical observation of reality, I will make a theory. So we made a theory out of this existing, this observation, empirical observation, realist observation of the city-states and how they work and what were the behavior. So this is why he's considered the founding father of political science, whilst Plato is considered the founding father of, together with Aristotle, of political, with Socrates, of political philosophy. So Socrates and overall Plato, they do political philosophy, while Aristotle did something that is more similar to political science, because he wanted to draw conclusion from the empirical observation of reality. So he went around 159 states and he made these conclusions. So his conclusion, first, that we all know is human beings are by nature political animals who want to live together in communities. So first of all, you say, human beings they want to live together because they think that cooperation, collaboration, living together, relationship, increase the well-being of the single individual. So they want to live together, and living together means establishing politics, establishing political relations. So, this is a political anthropology. Political anthropology means which kind of relation human beings have to politics. So, out of the observation of this 158 city-state, he said the constitution. He wanted to observe the constitution of the different constitutions of this city-state. Okay, so how politics was organized, how government was organized, so how were the governing body. And so he made up with his theory. He had a theory of the forms of government. So he came up, he used this empirical method, and he came up with these three forms. So he said, I visited 158 city-states. I observed them in reality. I see that they result from the human nature that wants to live together. But then I see that some city-states are ruled by one man, and I call it monarchy. I see that some city-states are ruled by a few, aristocracy, so the best ones go to the charge, they go to the government, is governed by a few, aristocracy, and then ruled by many, which is called polity. Okay? But then what he says is, we have these three forms of government, which is in general the three forms of government: monarchy, aristocracy, and polity. I call these as three forms of government in this way when the rulers act in the public interest. So when they act with virtue. So he didn't say there is one which is better than the other. He didn't say there is one which is better than the other. He just said, I see these three different forms. There is not one which is better. What is better is when these guys, can be one man, can be few men, or can be many, or can be the population, they start to act in their own private interest. When this happens, when they act with no virtue, when they act in the private interest, the monarchy becomes tyranny, the aristocracy becomes oligarchy, and the polity becomes democracy. On this ground, Aristotle was agreeing with Plato. He didn't like democracy that much. He was seeing that democracy was bringing up, the worst. The worst. It was, the lowest level of knowledge who was taking the majority. So he didn't like that much. But he said, a government of the entire demos can work. forms of the polity, but when the polity starts to think of their own private interest, like we said before in the case of pension or retirement and so on, it degenerates and becomes democracy. So again, he went through 159 states. He saw that there are these three main forms of government everywhere: ruled by one man monarchy, few men aristocracy, by many polity. But then when those who rule start to act in their own private interest, usually these forms degenerate into tyranny, into oligarchy, and into democracy. So this is the theory of the three forms of government or constitutions. Okay, in general terms, it depends on who is, in which interest they're acting. But from this, we come with the theory of the mixed form of government. So he said there is not one of the three forms which are the better, which is the best one. There is no one, but it's good to mix. It's a mixed form of government in which you put together, for some ways, the monarchy, for some elements, aristocracy, and some elements of politics. Okay? In the next class, we're gonna see the Roman Republic, because the Roman Republic really tried to build an institution in which you have all these three forms put together. The Roman Republic was a republic who resisted for centuries because they built they took the ideas of Aristotle, because the Greeks, they were very good thinkers. The Romans were much more practiced. And so they took the ideas of the Greeks and they tried to transform them into political institutions. So what he was saying is, the best government must be a mixture. Let's see the theory of justice. So also he started to discuss the concept of equality that we will see. Also the concept of equality is a good point in Aristotle. The concept of equality, what does it mean? It says there is a difference between equity and equality. So there can be a situation in which there is equity because we're all equal in this class, so we all have the same, we'll all have the same opportunities, but maybe if one of us is, cannot see the slides because he's blind, maybe equity and treating him just as the other is not justice. It doesn't produce real equality, So there is this idea that a society that works together is a society in which there is distributive justice. What does it mean? For example, this means that if somebody wants to study but doesn't have the means to study, the society tries to help him. The idea that everybody can vote, so everybody is equal in terms of political rights. But if one person is unable to read, probably cannot get the sufficient degree of knowledge in order to get able to vote in its own interest. So distributive justice means translating equity into real equality. Means providing some forms of redistribution among the population in order to achieve real equality. So then we're done with the ancient political thought. So ancient political thought, we see that we have these three authors, Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, and then for them, all of them focus on the need of political virtue, which is crucial for a society to be well governed. So those who govern must have virtue, then also the citizens must have virtue, political virtue. And then the idea that republic is a political movement, political doctrine centered on the idea of civic duty, of civic virtue, of civic participation as the central thing, because you consider the republic the thing to belong to anybody. Okay, so we have virtue, we have the republic, we have the theory of citizenship, so the idea of citizenship as belonging to a political community. Okay, so, and the idea of polis, the idea of polis as the origin of politics.